Thank you folks for clicking on the video. If you'd like to be informed when new videos go live, please hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit that bell notification icon. Please feel free to like, comment, and share the video with family and friends, as it really does help the channel grow in the current YouTube algorithm structure.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Swamp Dog Games. Today we'll be doing a review of the Basic Fantasy RPG's Field Guide of creatures malevolent and benign. If you're not familiar with the Basic Fantasy, it's kind of a generic OSR, old school Renaissance title using some of the old school game mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons, cleans it up and makes an open source RPG out of it. This booklet is effectively the expanded bestiary for the game. Now, the core rulebook for the Basic Fantasy actually does include a small bestiary in it with tons of monsters that you could have adventures for years, probably, if you didn't mind lots of repeats that are available to you. This is just an expanded bestiary guide for the Basic Fantasy setting. But first, before we get into more about the Basic Fantasy Field Guide, a quick word about the Basic Fantasy RPG setting in general. The first thing to know about the Basic Fantasy, besides that it is an OSR title, is what it says on the back of most of their books: don't buy this book. The reason being, all Basic Fantasy material that's been officially published is available on their website at thebasicfantasy.org. basicfantasy.org. All of the material here, you can get it in PDF form. You can get the raw ODT file that all these books were written in. ODT is Open Document Text. It's sort of like an open source equivalent of Microsoft Word. It does work in Microsoft Word, though, because of how heavily edited these books are with the heavy formatting and stuff. Microsoft Word still doesn't play nice with ODT. That's more of a fault of Microsoft more than the ODT format. However, ODT does work well in LibreOffice or OpenOffice, both of which are free online office suites as well. That you also can get the cover and some additional things to be able to print these out yourself through professional services such as lulu.com, or in my case, I bought all of this through the direct links through amazon.com. Now, all of this was bought at once through one order on amazon.com and came together as a bulk package. The books themselves, it's kind of cheap Amazon print on demand, binding, glue format. The paper is a little bit pulpy. Nothing particularly special about it, but that's what is part of the charm of Basic Fantasy, is that the books, you're paying for the at-cost printing. Each of these was about or a little less than $3 a pop, plus shipping and handling to get. So you're just paying for the, even though the books, it's your standard low fare print on demand, you're only paying the at-cost printing. Or you can, again, if you have a good printer at home and want to do so, print out the material yourself. Over the next couple weeks, I'll be doing a review of pretty much all of the Basic Fantasy RPG series that have direct print links to lulu.com or to Amazon. I won't be necessarily going over some of the books that don't have physical media links. I am old school. I like my print material. Heck, I still read a physical newspaper. That's just me. But you can download all of these for free, PDF format, online, and use it, edit it, make it your own, print off your own. And because they are switching over content slowly from the OGL 1.0A to the Creative Commons, I believe, by share-alike license, at least so far as their core rulebook is going. You can also build your own RPG on top of this and provide your own RPG out for others to partake in the joy. There's another RPG series out there called Odysseys and Overlords that is someone built on top of the Basic Fantasy system and released it themselves. But now, back on to the review of the Field Guide. So, back to the Basic Fantasy Field Guide. There is a second field guide that is also available on the website as well. That one is not currently direct, just push a button and buy it, supported yet through Lulu or Amazon.com. You can go through a couple hoops to print off yourself. I wasn't quite willing to jump through those hoops. I'm only buying the ones that have the direct links set up, but you can get it in print format yourself, just having to deal with some of their wraparound things that the print on demand services for dealing with the covers. I myself am not wanting to do that. I believe they also have the preview guide for the Creative Commons version of this out as well. This is still using the OGL 1.0a version. So that can be a downside to the print on demand. Some of these are a little out of date. There might be a release candidate number higher than what is available print directly, but close enough for my needs. As I said, if you look at the core rulebook for Basic Fantasy, it already has a basic bestiary included in it. This is pretty much what you would expect out of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. If you would say about half of the monsters were included in the Basic Fantasy core rulebook, this is probably your other half, with even more monsters available through their second field guide that is available at basicfantasy.org/downloads. Through here, it uses the OSR-inspired, essentially D&D 2nd edition and older format for its monsters. You have the armor class, you have its hit die, which you can use then to determine its HP, the attacks, type of attacks, the damage they're done, its movement. The one complaint I have with this, and is also a core complaint with Basic Fantasy in general, is that you get the bestiary and it doesn't discreetly tell you the saves. If you take a book such as Old School Essentials and get the monster guide here, it does tell you their saving throws on this page. It's hidden in here, but you can see the D, W, the P, the B, and the S. This is telling you the saving throws for monsters in OSE. In Basic, you have to have and flip back to the core Basic Fantasy rulebook, define the saving throws for the core classes, and then cross-reference fighter level 6 with their particular saving throw. Now, because of it all being free, it's not a cash grab, it's just an annoying design feature. I believe it's there so that they could just put one chart in once, they could edit it, change the chart, and to make the Basic Fantasy game more modular so people could mod it. Therefore, you only have the one chart, you edit that once, and then everything then flows immediately through it because you're cross-referencing that chart. However, I find it particularly annoying, and I would prefer to actually print these pages out with their saving throws attached if I were going to be using them in an adventure. But thankfully that can be easily accomplished because you have the ODT. You can then directly edit the file that this was built off of and just print it off for your own private needs. The artwork is a wide range depending upon who is doing it for this book, which kind of brings back that old school feel, because often TSR didn't have in-house artists. They subcontracted a lot of it, so you would have multiple artists outside doing one-off pieces, and so you have this desperate design between monsters in the book, and you can see it was done by multitudes of different people, versus now where they have a staff art team that spends the whole time making sure that everything is universally coherent and everything looks like it was designed by the same person. This really gives you that old school feel. The monsters, nothing that I could find particularly stood out as unique to this RPG. If you're familiar with books like Castles in Crusade, which they do take a lot of monster descriptions. In the old core rulebook, I'm not sure about 4th edition, but 3rd, it does reference that it uses a lot of descriptions from Castles in Crusades. It does use a lot of monsters that you've already seen before, but provides them, and again, in a open source format that you can freely, as in freedom, use to your own heart's content, or build your own custom content on top of and share it. So unlike Wizards that decided to try to lock down D&D, Basic Fantasy is like, here's our baby, go have fun with it, as most gamers should do, is use a product as a base and then build their own custom content on top of it. You have a ton of different monsters in here, everything from your standard to getting to your bizarre. I think there's a chicken somewhere in here, and then you can, of course, get then immediately to your Infernal Succubus, because what campaign doesn't have a evil succubus involved in it somewhere? I don't know. Like, I haven't had a campaign with a succubus other than Rise of the Rune Lords, and that was about it. But your giant owls, your regular owls, plenty of material in here. Again, if you view like the original Monsters Manual for Dungeons and Dragons, half of those creatures are in the core book, half of them are in this book with a few additions on top of it, and some expansions of some classes. Like here you have multiple different versions of the zombie. You have some multiple versions of a skeleton, some charts to quickly sort them by hit die so that you can quickly determine the power level, and of course the requisite OGL license. Now, for the rating of this book, flat out, if you are playing Basic Fantasy, then by all means, this is a natural 20. You have to have this book, in my opinion, if you are playing Basic Fantasy. Now, if you're like me, I tend to prefer either Castles or Crusades. My player handbook is elsewhere at the moment, or Old School Essentials with my groups. This, by being completely free, is theoretically usable. Most of the monsters I've seen equivalents in here. There were a lot that did have stat blocks either in OSE or Castles and Crusades already, depending upon what your RPG is. As long as it's D&D compatible, OSR compatible, you're playing that Dungeons and Dragons engine game, you can use this. Outside of Basic Fantasy, however, it depends upon what your RPG includes. Because it's free, take a look at it. Depending upon if your game already has it or not, the value proposition for this game, for this monster manual, because you have to cross-reference the core rulebook, because it may already exist in your rulebook, I would say the value for it drops down to about a 14 outside of the Basic Fantasy system. Again, completely free. You can use what of it you want, but with OSE or Castles and Crusades, I already have so many monsters that are already fully statted out. Unless there's something that grabs me from here, I'm going to just use those pre-statted out monsters with everything necessary already attached to them in those games. The print version of this, again, if you're playing Basic Fantasy, the value proposition for this game probably brings it down to about an 18 from the 20 playing Basic Fantasy. It's $3. Because it's so cheap, you can open it up, you can mark it down, you can write your notes in it, you can, if you're using perhaps monsters in here as a boss character for your players to fight, you could put their HP in here. If you were going to do that, I might suggest probably just printing off the page, though, and adding in like what they do in their other adventures, where they include the hit die boxes for them so that you can mark them off. You might be better off just printing the page off with that included rather than getting the whole book. But if you're going to be playing basic fantasy, you absolutely need the full range of monsters, and you like print, your value proposition is going to be about an 18. If you're doing a game other than the basic fantasy system, print wise, I can't really recommend it because so many of these are already statted out in your RPG already, probably with the saving throws directly in here, not having to cross reference it. Looking at old school essentials, they're right there in the stat blocks. Your value proposition for this outside of basic fantasy is probably, I would actually argue, even lower than an 8. It's still worth printing off what you need out of here. If, again, you like print media and maybe you just have the PDF for another book, something that you can write notes off or use for bosses, maybe. But I would probably not recommend actually buying this if you are not playing basic fantasy, because the likelihood of your monsters already being statted out is so high. Anything unique to this book, you can go look at it. Like, you're not even supporting the artists really by buying this book, if because again, you're buying it at cost. The $3 is what Amazon charges to make this book and then ship it. That none of that goes to Chris Gonnerman or the creative team or the artist who donated their work to it. So you don't even have to feel bad about not supporting an artist's work, because you buy this, it's not going to them anyway. You're just printing the buying the at cost material. So print wise, basic fantasy, absolutely get it. Everyone else, maybe. Oh well, that has been a review of the Basic Fantasy Field Guide of Creatures Malevolent and Benign. Again, there is a second one of this that is in PDF format on their downloads page. Again, everything is going to be slowly ported over to the new Creative Commons by Share Alike license. This is still using the old OGL. What are your thoughts? Please let me know in the comments below. What do you think about Basic Fantasy? What do you think about the field guide? Am I right? Am I wrong? Is this so epically useful outside of Basic Fantasy that you can't help but buy millions of these to give out to your adventurers so they can see what monsters are upcoming in their adventure? Though I probably wouldn't recommend actually giving players that. They already cheat enough when it comes to fighting monsters. You want them cheating even harder. Oh well, I will see you next time with our next Basic Fantasy review, hopefully. In the meantime, may all your rolls... Aha! We rolled good. Be a 19. See you next time.